serious front pack, and used to swimming this distance very, very fast. Remember, the Lionels and that are used to swimming Ironmans. So it's a little bit slower. So they're more on the slower side as opposed to the faster side. So, but I watched the thing that Talbot Cox put out with Lionel Sanders recently, and Lionel's like, I'm going to hurt them bad on the bike, which is what he always says. He's an exciting guy to watch when he's in this mindset, and I think he's going to build a lot of confidence after that 1 hour record he did in Canada was just remarkable.
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Like it's legitimately big, man. Like it's pure cycling big. That's how big it is. And he and I just think he's going to come off that with such confidence, and he's ready to put out a big performance on that bike. And I think he'll lead into any deficit without question. It's whether the problem he will have is these guys are going to get off the bike and they can run.
That's Chris McCormack talking about the upcoming race at Challenge Daytona. And this is the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors PrecisionHydration.com. Electrolytes in different strengths that match how you sweat. You can get 15% off your first order with the code Oxygenaddict15. And we're also brought to you by GroupEvolution.com, luxury triathlon training camps. Get coached by Dave Scott at an exclusive 19th century chateau in France. Use the code Oxygenaddict15 for 15% off. Those Dave Scott camps are happening the first couple of weeks of April. All right, everybody, welcome to the show. I hope you're all good. Nice to be back with you. Nice to be able to chat things triathlon. And what a show I've got lined up for you today. Obviously, we've got Challenge Daytona coming up, the PTO Championship this coming weekend. And I thought, who better to talk to this about than not only one of the legends of the sport, but also a guy who is probably more passionate about the sport and more knowledgeable about the history of the sport than anybody else. So we've got Macca, Chris McCormack over, not over, we didn't bring him over from Australia just for the show. That would be weird. We managed to do it over Zoom. We had a really good chat, actually. I had a really enjoyable, Macca's a really busy guy, and I got an email that said that I'd asked him if he could come and do it, and got an email that said, hey man, I'm around now. If you can be on in 5 minutes, let's do it. So we jumped on. Sun was rising here in the UK, sun was setting there in Sydney. So really good chat with him. Unfortunately, a lot of the names that we talk about on our interview, they've since announced that they've dropped out. So, you could argue some of it's out of date, but I think it's really good chat. And, Macca is one of the legends of the sport, and it's great to talk to him about all of this stuff. As well as that, we hear about SuperLeague Tri taking over Malibu. We also hear about his involvement with the Pho3nix Foundation, which I've seen a few tweets around about, but it was great for me to find out more about that. And I think you'll all be interested in finding out more about it as well. So tune in later on for more chat from Macca. All right then, so first up, this week's news brought to us by Precision Hydration. So you guys have got to remember, get online, take their online sweat test. They'll be able to give you a really good lead as to whether you're a very salty or a very heavy sweater. And if you are, the key to staying hydrated isn't just drinking water on its own. It's actually to drink the right concentration of electrolytes in the fluids that you take in. So guy like me, I'm a really, really salty sweater. I'm not particularly heavy sweater, but my sweater's got something like 4 or 5 times more concentrated than the average human. So if I don't replace the electrolytes, I get 2 problems. I get horrendous cramps when I'm training indoors, either be it in the pool, definitely on the turbo. Don't know if you guys get this. When I'm in the pool, my calves lock up, my feet lock up, and my toes go like they're sticking out at weird angles. And that doesn't happen if I'm taking care of, keeping on top of getting the electrolyte drinks in. So it's absolutely key for effective training for me. Even on the turbo, I'll get my lower calves locking up completely as I'm coming to the end of the power hour. So it's really, really essential for me. You also find if you race in very hot weather or you race very long distances or both, I had real problems and I couldn't work it out at the time back when I was racing seriously. I thought I was drinking enough. Clearly the problem was I wasn't taking in enough electrolytes because I get to the end of the race, I'd go really dizzy. I'd feel really sick. Oftentimes, I'd spend some time throwing up. I ended up on a couple of drips. Followers of mine on Facebook might have seen photographs of me from Almere back in 2008 at the World Championships, where I'm just like wrapped in a foil blanket on a drip in the medical tent, utter misery. So if you've had that experience, electrolytes can certainly be a massive part of figuring out what's going on. And it's a really easy fix for a large part of those problems. So check them out over at precisionhydration.com and use the code Oxygenaddict15. Right, so big news first up this week. A lot of you will have seen this. It's been all over the press. The headlines are here: Andy Starkowitz busted for doping offences and given a 4-year ban by Ironman. Now, as always with these cases, it isn't as cut and dried as that. I certainly don't purport to know all the ins and outs of this, but it looks to me as though he's been a bit foolish and very unlucky at the same time. Long and short of this is he applied for TUE, a therapeutic use exemption, because he struggled really badly with asthma and a chest infection in the run up to Kona. He dropped out at Kona. He was given a very strong inhaler steroid, which was on the banned substances list. And no one's suggesting that this is performance enhancing. And in fact, I think it's since been removed from the banned list, or at the very least it's due to be removed very soon. He applied for TUE for this before he went out and he raced, I believe it was Ironman Florida. Yeah, that's right. And when he raced there, the TUE hadn't come through. He raced anyway. He had applied for it, but it was subsequently told that he hadn't been granted the TUE. So that's the thing. So this inhaler has solved this problem with the breathing and the chest infection, but he's been done. Now, there's a lot of schadenfreude around because in the past, Starkey is, as we know, he's one of the big personalities in the sport. He's been very outspoken about dopers. He's been very outspoken even about people who race with TUEs. Now, personally, in my book, I think there's a big difference between the kind of therapeutic use exemption you get for something like Lance was done for back in the day, a corticosteroid that they claimed was for saddle sores. There's a difference between that and somebody needing an inhaler for genuine reasons. Obviously, the waters have got very, very muddy because of the Jiffy Bag scandal with Team Sky and their use of known asthma medications that also allegedly have other performance-enhancing benefits as well. I don't think there's any, there's no inference of that in this case. It's simply that the doctor prescribed him something that was on the list. So, you know what? I feel really sorry for the guy. I feel really sorry for the fact that he's a professional triathlete that can now no longer take part in his sport. But that being said, he knew the rules. He took part in something when he didn't have the TUE in place. It would have been, well, it's easy to sit here and say he shouldn't have taken part. At the end of the day, the guy lives or dies on the prize money that he makes for him and his family, doesn't he? So there you go. Very unfortunate situation. If he's listening, I wish him all the best. I've invited him to come on the show and talk about it. Not heard back, so we shall see. It'd be very interesting to hear his side of the story on air, as it were. Like I say, I'm not here to vilify anybody. I think there's definite shades of grey in all of this, but it'd be very, very interesting to hear his side of the story and to hear how a professional athlete is affected by these issues. We all know that we don't want people blatant flat out doping and taking testosterone and taking EPO. There's shades of grey in this as well, though, and we've only got to go back 10 years or so to the point where drinking too many cappuccinos would have got you popped for doping. Caffeine was taken off the banned list, and it was on at that time. So, this inhaler drug he's been given has been taken off since then. So you have to assume, and again, I'm not an expert here, but you have to assume it's taken off because it hasn't got performance enhancing benefits. So there we go. Very, very sad story for Andy Starkowitz there, and for the sport in general, I think. And on that note, I think most of the news that's going to happen is going to happen in the run-up to Daytona this week. There's been no racing this weekend otherwise. So I'll do a bit of a wrap-up after our interview, and I'm planning to go through the start list that we know as it stands at the moment. But do you know what? Let's just let this roll. This is a cracking interview. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to hand you over. First, a shout out to our sponsors, Group Evolution. How did I forget this? Group Evolution go on training camps coached by Dave Scott in a 19th century chateau in France. It's got its own pool. It's got its own open water venue, running track, quiet roads to train on, great food and ride support, and you can get coached by Dave Scott. His 2 coaching weeks are the first 2 weeks of April, I believe. I think it's the 8th to the 15th and the 15th to the 22nd. You can get 15% discount on booking using the code Oxygenaddict15. If you want to find out more, there's a link in the show notes you can go through from. Okay, so get over and check that out. I'll be having Dave on the show in a couple more weeks' time as well, so watch out on Twitter for the chance to ask him some of your personal questions. All right, without further ado, let's hand over to this week's brilliant interview of the week with 2-time world champion, 2-time Kona champion, and God knows how many more times world champion ITU distance, Chris Macca McCormack. Okay, Chris McCormack, welcome back onto the show. How are you doing today, man?
Really, really good. That was strange. I'm looking at you on the screen now. You started your watch like we're in the middle of a race. That's the endurance athlete in you.
It's the only way I'm going to beat you, Chris.
Yeah, it's like, ready, go.
You know what this is? This is so that if we get any juicy quotes, I can make a little note here, and then I can use it at the trail of the show. There we go. Yeah. Recording in Zoom, it doesn't give you a little timer on the screen anymore.
Understood. I thought it was just habit. Too many race starts.
No, not me, mate. The only thing I'm timing is how much extra food I'm eating every evening at the moment. It's getting sad. So how are you? You joining us from Sydney? You had a good summer over there?
Well, summer's coming. Yep, summer's just arriving. It's starting to get really, really warm and nice. It's beautiful, but we've done I guess all we've talked about all year is this COVID thing, right? But I think Australia's done a marvelous job. Like we have, I think, like 2 or 3 cases in the whole country, and so life is normal down here, but we're at the bottom of the world, so it's locked off. And when you're a person like myself who's so used to being up where you are and traveling around, it's been like a caged lion. So I am very eager to get out. But that being said, I'm enjoying time at home with the family, and it's not a bad place to be in Sydney. Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty amazing to think we are, like, obviously the UK, Europe, America. It's hard to describe how absolutely mental it is when you read in the press and you're seeing these hundreds of thousands of cases. And I actually hadn't realised that you guys had like literally 2 or 3 cases down in Australia. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, we peaked out. Melbourne got locked down, I'm going to say probably from July for about 3 months, a really hard lockdown. But it peaked at 650 cases for a day. That was where it peaked.
Yeah.
So they locked the storm and they got it down. So we're sort of, Australia and New Zealand went for this elimination strategy. They opted for that option early, got in early, locked the borders, and got it under control. And now we're able to travel between Australia and New Zealand, and we're hoping to have these green corridors and just try and get back to life. But I think economically it's been the best thing to do because life is normal here. It's absolutely normal. Like, there's no social distancing. We had 60,000 people at the football the other night. It's just normal.
Wow. Well, listen, one of the reasons I wanted to get you on, I was looking for someone to talk to about Daytona, and I was scratching my head, and I'll tell you what happened. Up bumped an old interview you did with Rich Roll. So episode 24 of the Rich Roll podcast from back in like 2013. I was like, oh, wow, Mac has been on Rich Roll's podcast. This is great. So
with a training partner of mine for years in LA. Before he was Rich Roll, the famous vegan that he is, me and Rich were swimming partners and rode, and I used his house to film a lot of our MX endurance stuff. I've known Rich for years and years and years. Now he's Mr. Go-To Vegan. It's amazing. And good.
This is what blew my mind was obviously, his podcast is now, it is the podcast in the world, isn't it? It's millions of downloads an episode. And it was obvious. It wasn't just like he wasn't making this up. You guys had trained together for years, and I hadn't known the background of you going over and training LA and how good the training was there on the outskirts of Los Angeles.
Yeah. I based in Los Angeles. I moved to the United States from Europe in 2000, primarily because I just met a girl who is now my wife, and she struggled a little bit with the language. We're living in French-speaking Switzerland. And I was looking for a bit of a change and opted to move to San Diego. And I'd sort of commute between San Diego and Boulder a bit, and still always come across to Europe. And I didn't really enjoy San Diego. I opted to move north to Santa Monica and the riding, and I loved LA. And LA was our home for 13 years. We owned a home there. When I think of my home in the United States, it's Santa Monica, it's Los Angeles. So I know the place really well, and Rich and I were good friends, and I brought Ronnie Shiltnick there and Terenzo Bazzoni and now a lot of people know Holly Lawrence, and everyone calls Los Angeles home. But back then people used to go, you train in LA? How? I'm like, well, you've obviously never been there because the training in Los Angeles is remarkably good. Yeah, up in the Malibu mountains and up through the valley. It's some spectacular bike riding, spectacular running.
That's awesome. And so obviously the big announcement that's come about a week or two ago now is SLT SuperLeague Tri have acquired the Malibu Triathlon. How much of that played a part in the fact that you acquired that event?
We sort of, it's just been announced. We actually, it's not off the record, it's on the record here now. We were in discussions with them late last year, and we actually purchased in early February of this year with the objective of just keeping the race as it was this year, understanding COVID was on, and just having an event and then bringing a professional event maybe in 2021, which is where we're at. And we were looking for a race in the United States of America. And the having lived there, it's Malibu, it's a trendy city, it's Los Angeles, it's weather dependable, right? Which is not necessarily the case in the United States as you get onto the East Coast, especially at the time of year when we're looking at delivering our races, September, October. So California is very, very warm, the weather dependable. You've got 5,000 people doing it. It's the Hollywood-driven race. They do a lot of work for the hospital there. They do a big fundraising event. So it's a really established core event, and I'd won it many, many times. It's probably my favorite race in the US. So when we were talking about events, we talked about, looking at Chicago as a potential acquisition. We looked at New York as a potential acquisition. We're looking at events in Florida. And I kept coming back. I kept bringing the team back to Malibu. I said, look, let's go and speak to Michael Epstein, who owns the event. You've got J-Lo races here, Matthew McConaughey races here, like all the celebrities. I said, we can carry that momentum at a professional field around Super League in a brilliant venue and take Super League to the States in LA where they're used to, this sort of stuff. And we piggyback off all the momentum of Hollywood, all the film studios that race and compete. And I think it'll be a great buy. And I guess the team agreed, and we sort of went through that process, and we're excited to buy it. I just think of all the events I could own, I'm very, very happy we bought that one. I think it has the history is important to me, but I think the venue and keeping this entire short distance racing alive in the United States of America is key, because, Ironman has become such a monolith, but I think post-COVID, that's softened. There won't be as many races like that around, and people will be looking for different experiences. And Malibu, even though we're at saturation at 5,000 people doing the race already, there's a lot of new people that will come to this event, and I think Super League will really benefit from that.
Yeah. So one of the things you were always famous for was you were always the biggest fan of the sport. That's how it came across whenever I heard an interview with you. You were a fan before you were a competitor. And I remember listening to your interviews in the early days, and there was almost like a disbelief that you were getting to travel the world and to race Chicago, and getting to travel the world and to race Escape from Alcatraz and stuff like this. And then obviously you moved into 70.3 and Ironman, and that was equally a passion for you. But it feels as though, and I don't know whether this is just me, it feels as though the interest globally has shifted in the last couple of years towards primarily 70.3 and Ironman distance racing, and away from those, certainly, outside the WTS events, the World Triathlon events, away from the short course racing. Is that something that you're really keen to bring back, this idea that triathlon happens all the way from super sprint right the way through to Ironman distance? Yeah.
Well, I think that interest in that late, the mid 90s all the way through that earlier 2000, where you had big events like Chicago, and they meant a lot to own that. Like winning Chicago was bigger than any. Like it was, you built your season off that win. You could sign deals with bike companies and everything. It was an enormous race, and that sort of trickled off as 70.3 racing came, because I had this conversation once. The great event at Wildflower. There was a beautiful triathlon in Wildflower, very historic event, the biggest half Ironman race I think that's ever been. They used to have 8,000 or 9,000 competitors. Yeah. It was like the Woodstock of triathlon. And I remember as Ironman 70.3 came late in about 2008, 2009, and Wildflower was seeing its numbers decline, and I went up there to do the Olympic distance race just to be part of the festival. And one of my new friends when I say new triathlon friends from Los Angeles, like, why are you doing that race? It's not an Ironman 70.3. I said, yeah, but it's a tough half Ironman. It's the best. He's like, yeah, but it doesn't count. I'm like, mate, if you think the only reason a race counts is because there's an Ironman brand on it, you're missing the whole purpose of this sport, mate, because that's irrelevant. He said, yeah, but you can't do a fast time. I'm like, man, is this what the sport's becoming now? It's all about me. It's very narcissistic, as opposed to it being about replicating or being part of something that had happened before and experiencing that. It's more about look at me. And I found that very sad. And that's sort of been definitely the demise of many of these incredible short distance races, which have now just become community events that people use for stepping stones to these 70.3 races. And I think that's been also fed on the simple fact that none of the big professionals race those races anymore. You know, I did Chicago with Crowe and Craig Walton, Simon Lessing and Spencer Smith. Everyone was there. Mike Peig, Mark Allen in the same race. It doesn't happen anymore. So with Super League coming back, we're going to have the best triathletes in the world, athletes that they are aware of, Olympic champions, and they're back racing short distance racing. And it's sort of, you need that momentum in order to continually drive the importance that, you know, we shouldn't be defined by what names on a race, on the race entry. We should be defined by what that race means to us, or what it means to compete in that event, and the difficulties and the history of it. And I think when people get back to thinking that way, they'll start to really engage in some of the most beautiful events in the world. And I think Malibu is one of those.
So do you think, you know, if you go back to sort of the mid-90s, everybody wanted triathlon to be in the Olympics. It was going to validate the sport, get triathlon to the Olympics, and then we've made it. Do you think that in a way, in the same way that the Ironman brand thing that you've just talked about, if it's not an Ironman, it doesn't count. Do you think a similar sort of thing happened unwittingly with the WTS races, and that now you've got all the WTS stars, but their priority races are the WTS ones, that they've got to get the points to qualify, the athletes to qualify for the Olympics? It's become that's it, isn't it? And yes, there are Olympic distance races that still go on. You've got, you know, Chicago and London and things like this still happen, but they're very different races, aren't they?
Without question. I think that the defining moment with the Olympics came high performance programs and athletes attached to national federations, where before that you were a bit of a sole trader, exactly like the Ironman athlete exists. The Jan Frodeno and Daniela Reef do what they want when they want, have their own commercial sponsors. The ITU, in its momentum to get us to the Olympics, came with a lot of baggage, in the sense that you're now part of a system. Your sponsors are restricted, your racing is restricted, and that definitely saw the demise, and it saw this shift between non-drafting and drafting choices for athletes. So I sort of existed in both worlds, because I was sort of in that Olympic beginning of the Olympics and still being able to capitalize on that Bud Light series. It became the North American Tri Series. It became Chicago and the Lifetime Fitness Series, and now he's gone. But that professionalism, and I mean professionalism in the sense of being a sole trader and the ability to brand yourself with partners, was sort of taken away with the ITU. Unless you're a Jan Frodeno or the Olympic champion Alistair Brownlee, you just lived off the funding that your federation gave. You know, I saw that as a really, really sad piece, and the demise of short course racing, as you said, and the uptake of Ironman racing is that sole trader model, where you're being able to, as a professional, brand yourself, select your own events, and that comes with a little bit more stress. But some athletes prefer being able to do, being able to do what the federation says. And I think the other big monumental shift was when the WTS opted out of the single-day World Championship model, where they had a World Cup Series winner and then you would go to a World Championship. I preferred that model. I think once they brought that series in and they rewarded consistency, you started to eat into preparation phases for athletes, and their ability to select events outside of that WTS series became very, very tough. And it killed off, for the professionals, they killed off the Lifetime Fitness Series, which, as you know, Greg Bennett won $550,000 in that series, right? Like, those days are done. And it's interesting nowadays when I talk to some of the athletes, and I tell some of them, what did you used to get for that race? I used to be doing $30,000. They're like, what? Back then, like, they're winning 5 now, or 3 or 2. And I've had a conversation with Jan on appearance fees we used to get for events. They were bigger back then than they're getting now, and the sport's bigger now.
Right?
So it's a very different landscape now, and because the other thing on the Ironman side, back when we shifted across to Ironman in 2002, I think we said this on the last time we spoke, but different people owned the licenses for Ironman. So if I wanted to do an Ironman in Europe, I'd go and speak to the Triangle at Ironman Austria. They own Nice, Austria, and I'd go and speak to Felix at Roth. I'd go and speak to the Frankfurt. I'd go and speak to I I could almost play them off each other and get the best appearance fee across multiple events. Now Ironman owns them all. So I speak to one person and they just say, that's the fee. There is no negotiation with anyone. So it just drove the dollar figure down. And I guess that's why the PTO was emerged, and hopefully they can bring it back up again. But time will tell.
So what do you make of the PTO then? That brings us around nicely to talk about them and the race in Daytona that's coming up. Obviously, there was nothing like this around in terms of an organisation and I suppose they had a couple of goes at it, didn't they, over the years, and nothing really ever stuck. What's your take on the PTO first, and then we'll go on to talk about Daytona.
The PTO, I think, I don't know what to think of them. I don't quite comprehend what they're doing, but I'm not one to stand from the sidelines and throw mud at people, because anyone who's coming into the sport with positive intentions, I'm very, very welcoming. And I just don't understand the business model. You raise capital, and sure, you can raise capital. And the guys have had, I always hear a lot of people on their podcast saying, yeah, but it's backed by a billionaire. Billionaires are not in the process of handing over money left, right, and centre just because they can. It usually comes with very, 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 very rigid investment strategy and investment plan. They go, there's your money. I expect this, and this to happen. And then you can come back for me for more. And if you haven't achieved, then c'est la vie. We're not doing anymore. And I'm just yet to fully grasp what that business plan of PTO is. They've been definitely paying the price purses for a lot of the professionals around the world in events and piggybacking off those events. But I find their digital presence relatively flat. And I'm excited about the Daytona event because there has been a lot of momentum around this and a lot of talk about the television product and how this is going to look. And it's the greatest field ever assembled, even though Daniela and Jan aren't racing. And I'm eager to see them. I'm eager to see some competition in 2020. I was so excited for the Hamburg race, and it seems like that was the last big event, even though we've seen other World Cups, that I actually sat down and got to enjoy. So the Daytona race, I will definitely be tuning in after seeing Lionel Sanders do that hour record, and Sebastian Kienle seems very keen to come back from his shoulder problems, and you've got Cameron Worth who's talking of coming over, and so many, and all of this in the shadow of a global pandemic in a country that has just gone through an election, tearing itself apart. It's like sitting. Sometimes I sit there thinking, "Jesus, nice to be in Sydney. Sit back and watch and see what happens." I'm not going to get COVID. I'm not going to get shot in the street, and I'll be able to get home safely. So we'll see. We'll see. But to cut a long story short, I'm looking forward to the race.
Oh, well, let's talk the racing and the races then, because I was sitting down and scratching out some names and looking at the rankings and the wildcards and stuff like this. So I figured it would be a good place to start. Well, the first place to start is, as you've already said, Jan and Daniela not racing. You've obviously got a bit of inside scoop on some of these guys, which will be interesting to know. What's the deal with Jan and his injuries at the moment? Do you know?
I haven't spoken to him, so I can't. Okay. Yeah, I haven't spoken. I know he was injured, and he announced it on his social, and I sent him a text, and he said, "I'm done for the season." So I assume that. Yeah, the good thing not the good thing, but Jan is very. Most athletes would panic when you've got a $1.5 million prize purse coming, and you haven't raced all year, and you're Jan Frodeno. You'd be thinking, "I've got to get this back there. I've got to get this problem solved so I can be on the start line and at least come second or third." Jan doesn't think like that. Jan's like, if I'm on that start line, I'm in the best physical condition of my career, and that's commendable, because I know probably myself, even though I was never really an injury-driven athlete, I would have been looking at a December 4 race, and it was probably a little late for me, but I would have still been thinking, you know what, $1.5 million, I'm going to find some form for this event. There's too much money on the line. So I respect them both in that sense. I know Daniela has had a problem, and it's still been pestering her, but she's on the mend. But there's a lot of new talent on the start list with Henry Schumann. You've got Vince racing for the first time, and I'm always eager to see those sort of athletes come across for their first dive into that 70.3 racing, because it's a shock to the system. These men, and on the women's side, can really ride bikes.
Well, there's this interesting split, isn't it? The distance is going to be, I'm not entirely sure. Is it 2K, 80K, and 15 or 16K on the run? It's something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't know what the run was. I think it's 80 on the bike too. Yeah. I didn't know what the run distance is.
So I think the run's 15, 16K, something like that, which is interesting, because obviously the longer it gets, the more you're going to back the 70.3 guys. But the shorter it is, you're thinking, okay, well, there's some amazing athletes who can cross over and do both. You've got Ali's capable of running a 66, 67-minute half marathon. But then you've got these real dark horses that you don't know what's Van St. Louis going to do over a 10-mile run. And you've got to back him to be just as quick over 10 miles as he is over 6. I think if it was 13, I'd be thinking, it's over double the distance he's raced at here. But over 10 miles, man, you've got to have a big stack to take down Vincent, haven't you?
Oh, without question. I do think, though, that, Vincent's relatively new to that TT position. He's definitely ITU Olympic focused, and I think he may find that horsepower, because there's a lot of it up front. Very, very difficult, especially in America if they have I'm not sure of the rules that they used to apply that stagger rule, which used to be an American, a UTS, USAT sanction rule. You couldn't ride directly behind the rider in front, which is difficult. It makes it a lot harder. You don't get that pacing, which is helpful. But the one thing with Vincent, and I think this is going to hurt potentially the weaker swimmers, even the Lionel Sanders, is he'll bring so much swimming power up front with Henry Schumann, and we know Alistair Brownlee will be there in Spain, in Valencia, when Vincent and Ali went head to head. Alistair Brownlee's back, he is so fit again and so ready. And I think he's going to be very, very tough to beat. And Vincent will just follow Alistair's lead, I think, and try and stay as close to him as possible.
Do you think that the 70.3 guys are going to have a surprise with how fast the swim goes out? Especially if you talk about a guy like Lionel, who, his swim's always been a bit questionable over the middle distance, let alone racing guys. You're going to have, as you said, you're going to have Finch, you're going to have Ali, you're going to have Johnny, Henry Schumann. That's a tasty front pack, isn't it? Over 2K of swimming.
Yeah, serious front pack, and used to swimming this distance, very, very fast. Remember, the Lionels and that are used to swimming Ironmans, so it's a little bit slower. So they're more on the slower side as opposed to the faster side. So. But, I watched the thing that Talbot Cox put out with Lionel Sanders recently, and Lionel's like, I'm going to hurt them bad on the bike, which is what he always says. He's an exciting guy to watch when he's in this mindset, and I think he's going to build a lot of confidence after that 1 hour record he did in Canada. It was just remarkable.
Phenomenal, yeah.
Phenomenal. Like, it's legitimately big, man. Like, it's pure cycling big. That's how big it is. And he And I just think he's going to come off that with such confidence, and he's ready to put out a big performance on that bike. And I think he'll lead into any deficit without question. It's whether the problem he will have is these guys are going to get off the bike and they can run, and they can run fast. Well, I think a lot faster than Lionel. So that margin of error, it's how quick he closes that gap from the swim, and then how much margin of error he gets, because Lionel's a fantastic front runner. You give him that lead, he's very, very hard to eat into. But if he doesn't have that lead, he's just not as good. And so that'll be the interesting dynamic. But those ITU athletes bring so much to the table. It's that's what I'm eager to see. And it's not, as we said, it's not at 70.3 distance. So being shorter, it's the old World Cup distance we used to have here on the Gold Coast. Mark Allen was very good at. Mike Pigg used to destroy Mark Allen on this course up here. It's just a distance that Mike owned, and that could be the case with, say, a Vincent or an Alistair in this case. I think Alistair, having done that Ironman last year at 7:45, having done Kona, having done a few longer races and come back and found some speed that he was looking for the Olympics, and now more recently with that Valencia performance and even that performance in Hamburg, I think we're seeing that Alistair find his feet again, and that experience in the longer distance, I just think will be the trump card that will see him win this race.
Yeah. What do you make of Christian Blumenfeld and Gustav Iden in the mix as well? Obviously, you've got a couple of guys there who their swim isn't quite there in the front pack in WTS races, but obviously Gustav's the reigning 70.3 world champion. Christian Blumenfeld is such an aggressive competitor against any distance, isn't he?
Yeah, I think they know that, and knowing with Christian on our Bahrain team, all those guys are on the Bahrain team. I sit in these little groups and I hear the conversation. So it's like a little fanboy like myself. It's quite interesting to be a part of. And I know the guys are very, very scared, or not scared, but concerned of Christian's bike power and his ability to run fast off a hard bike. the harder the bike, they all say to me, if it's a soft bike, Christian runs the same pace off an easy bike as he does a hard bike. So they're very aware that his weakness is to swim, and they will be attentive to making sure he doesn't capture the feet where they can. But he can stick very, very well, Christian Blumenfeld, and Gustav Iden as well. They're both remarkable at finding feet. And when you start to get more and more good swimmers in the mix, it puts more and more people. It's easier to tag the feet when there's 4 or 5 good swimmers as opposed to 1 or 2. So that they're an interesting dynamic. Christian's been in Bahrain training. He's still there at the moment before he flies across to Daytona. But yeah, Gustav Iden, I think, knowing Ali, he was devastated last year losing that world title in Nice to Gustav. He was quite confident going in that he'd done the work and was prepared. And I think the bike hurt him more than he anticipated. And I think he'll see this as an opportunity to, the next time he's raced Gustav over the distance, boom, remember me, sort of mindset of Alistair Brownlee that's delivered him so much success over the last decade.
So if you had to make the call, is Ali going to be your favourite for this?
Yeah, without seeing the list again, and I'm probably miss the TOs of racing, and I just don't see how you can beat Alistair Brownlee at the moment. And Lionel Sanders may do something remarkable with his bike power, but just having watched Alistair's progression for the season, watched him training like that, watched those World Cup races to chase that Olympic spot, seeing his confidence when he crossed the line in Valencia and he said to Vincent, "I'm coming," that's the current world champion. He beat him in a sprint, right? So, and it's Alistair Brownlee. You're a game human being to bet against this guy. Like he is never disappointed. It seems to be the common crux that you do as you age, and I felt it when I was an athlete, that people try and look for the next champion when the best one's standing right in front of you. Stop looking for something else. Look at what's in front of you, because he's phenomenal. And I just think he's got that momentum again, and he's in that Alistair Brownlee confidence mood, which he'll feed off. And I think when he's in that, Johnny tends to come for the ride. Johnny performs a lot better when Alistair's in that mood, because Alistair sort of works with him to get him motivated, and I think takes a lot of the leadership role that Johnny gets the ability to follow and then just deliver his talent. So those athletes you talked about, Schoomans, however, Schoeman did the 70.3 in South Africa. Was it this year or late last year? And he got beaten. So yeah. So I'm keen to see that, but I think Christian will be tough. I think he'll be close enough in the swim, maybe at 20, 30 seconds to be able to close those gaps, especially having Gustav with him. They're so used to training together and riding together. And there's so much horsepower coming from behind in Keenlay. Tim O'Donnell's going to be there. There's so much there. It's, actually talking about it, I'm getting excited. I'm actually looking forward to it. But I will go with the Alistair Brownlee to put that out there. I will go for him to win the event from Vincent Louis, from Christian Blumenfeld and Vincent Louis third. Now, I just pulled 2 people's names out.
There you go. I think we're going to get to see a good race, though. We're going to get to see one of the best races. I think it's going to be a proper foot race. These guys are going to try and kill each other on the bike. You've got Lionel, Sebi, maybe even Cam Worth coming through on the bike. There's going to be some foot power going on there. So, yeah, it's going to make for good racing.
Remember, Cam's just come off the Vuelta, right? So he's not going to be riding slow, and it's just how much he's done in the pool and how much he's done in that upper end running that's going to determine where Cameron Worth is. Yeah.
Right. Over on the ladies' side then, because this is quite a remarkable field, even more so than the men's, I think. When you add in the wildcards, the top 10 wildcards, we've got Norden and Spirig, obviously from, there's a bit of Olympic champion action right there for you, isn't there? You got Georgia Taylor. Yeah. You got Georgia Taylor Brown, Jess Lermonth and Flora Duffy added in. And these are the wild cards. These are the ones they've added afterwards. And then obviously Daniela's not racing, but we've got Lucy Charles Barkley, we've got Crowley, we've got Howe, we've got Adam. Holly Lawrence is obviously only 6th ranked. I think based on the fact that rankings are stacked towards Ironman, but at the 70.3 distance, it's hard to see beyond Holly, I think. She's one of the standout athletes over the 70.3 distance. And again, it's how are the short course races going to stack up over 80K, and how are the longer distance races going to hold on in terms of foot speed?
Well, I'm excited about the women's race too, to be honest. I think it's more exciting than the women because Lucy Charles brings that swimming horsepower up front and is an Ironman athlete. But she looks magnificent in the water in Ironman races. Not that she's magnificent in the water, full stop. But people like Flora Duffy and GTB, they can tag her, right? Yeah. They'll swim with her over 2K, or they'll be close. Which is
and Lucy Hall's in as well, isn't she? Lucy
Hall
was.
Plymouth. These women can swim, and Flora Duffy can swim, and she can ride, and she can run, right? So, I think that dynamic up front could. And Holly Lawrence is a magnificent swimmer, but she has to tag that group. She has to be with that group, and that could change the game for Holly, because I think the great thing about having Lucy Charles, if you're a Flora Duffy I think Georgia Taylor Brown maybe is a little bit inexperienced at the distance and may falter a bit on the bike. I think Jess Learmonth is strong enough to stay there, and I'm happy to be corrected by these women, and I'm just speculating here, girls, if you're listening. But I just think the great thing about Lucy Charles is she knows one pace, and that's from the front and hard, and Flora Duffy is the same mindset, and they will drive that front pace. And I think if that group can stay away, those two in particular, and Jess Learmonth and a couple of those women from that front swim, it's going to be hard for the Nicholas Spirigs and hard for the Nordens, who is a fantastic cyclist now, a Swedish champion, time trial champion, to close those gaps. And if they do, at what cost? Because you get off and Flora Duffy's winning World Cups, and she's in fantastic run form. She's a dual world champion herself, and she's prepped for an Olympic Games. So I just think that the entire range of the women's racing is more exciting. The wild cards, as you say, are a lot more exciting. And it's the first time we haven't looked at the Ironman athletes and gone, oh, well, this one. It's more of these 70.3 specialists and the ITU races that we're looking at to be competitive. And that's why they had to give these women wild cards, because they're the standout performers of the year.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Pho3nix Foundation. Tell us about your involvement in that. Let's hear a little bit about that, because I've become aware of it through reading your tweets and reading your social media, and had a Google and a read and saying it looks amazing. So give us the overall background to sort of how you got involved and what the idea of the foundation is.
Well, the Pho3nix Foundation was built off the back of a gentleman called Sebastian Kulczyk. He's one of Europe's wealthiest individuals. I call him a good friend now, I guess. And about 2 years ago, we were chatting about things, and he wanted to do something relatively philanthropic. He was, he's very successful businesses he's got, and he's like, Chris, I've got these businesses, but what am I going to buy another business? I got more money than sense. I want to do something that gives me. I said, well, I've never been in your position, Seba, because I've never been a multi-billionaire. But I read a lot. I've seen a lot of these guys that feel semi-unfulfilled like yourself. They become philanthropic. Look at Bill and Melinda Gates. You look at Warren Buffett. They give all their money away, and they get satisfaction at being able to change things with their networks and with the capital they've got. I said, what interests you in that sense? He's like, and so on that discussion, we sort of started talking about what sport meant to him, and he wished he had done sport as a kid if he could have his life over again, and he would have loved to have been a football player, and he stopped chasing that dream to become a businessman, which was probably the right decision in his life. But he said, I never stopped loving football, and I never stopped loving sport, and I never, reflecting now, he says reflecting, he's just turned 40. Reflecting now, I look back at my life, and some of the biggest lessons I ever learned in life were on the sports field. I learned discipline. I learned teamwork. I was mentally, and healthy, and I never realized now until I'm older and reflective. And so then he talked about the Pho3nix Foundation, and Phoenix for him it's a family emblem, and as a family they came from nothing, and they built an empire. And he's the third Phoenix, which is why the three. His grandfather, his father, and now Sebastian. And as a family, there's Phoenix is to rise again. And he said it's the perfect metaphor for sport, because you guys fail and you stand back up again. And, what he's worried about is the drop-off rate of kids in sport nowadays, because the participation level of kids doing sport is down 35%, globally, and it's falling. And he's like, look, kids are quitting when they fail. It's a byproduct, I guess, of society right now. It's too hard. I'm not playing anymore. We're back in the day, your father would say, stand up and hit the ball again, or go again. And he said, so I really want to encourage kids to do sport. And I said, well, there's your foundation, Seb. That's your foundation. Give kids the opportunity, if they're priced out of sport, to be able to compete in sport. So he's like, done. He formed the Pho3nix Foundation in Switzerland late last year. And pre-COVID, we were going to launch. We signed the triathlon team. We had all plans of signing surfers, skateboarders. We have the Olympic program. We have, sub-7, sub-8 event that we're doing with Alistair, and all these projects were going. And then COVID hit, and it sort of put a slowdown on things. But there's a lot going to be happening in the background. We're doing some great projects in triathlon where the team that you see, the squad, we call them the Pho3nix squad, will grow and expand. Lucy Charles and Nicola Spirig and athletes like that are doing, and Christian Blumenfeld and Alistair Brownlee are doing some amazing stuff, trying to break the world records in some of the Ironman distances. Very, very similar to the Ineos project with the sub-2-hour marathon project. So, but a lot of triathletes may go, well, that's not really a triathlon, but we want to see if breaking 7 hours with assistance is possible, or breaking 8 hours in a planned environment for the women is possible. And these are things that Steph was like, yeah, let's throw money at that, because he wants to encourage children to not be defined by what they think is impossible. When even people like Alistair Brownlee as an Olympic champion, there's still something that's possible to be done. And that's basically the mindset of the Pho3nix. So you'll see a lot more of us. We've got a lot in the pipelines. We've just been restricted with the whole entire world closing down this year. So, keep your eyes peeled for Pho3nix and follow everything we're doing on our digital channels. It's a really, really cool program. And I'm really stoked because I had a few friends living in Thailand and for the last 7 years, and having been stuck here in Sydney as part of the Tanyapura project, we engaged FINA, and we run the development swim program there for FINA. So for Rio, we had 30, well, not me anymore, but the team there had 32 athletes go to the Rio Olympics from all different countries like Madagascar, Micronesia, Sri Lanka, and they all come to Tanyapura because a lot of these countries don't have high performance programs or swimming pools for these athletes to train in. So we offered that. But a lot of those, because of the Olympic funding is in 4-year cycles, COVID has affected a lot of the funding. So a lot of athletes are on no funding now, but the Olympics is next year. So the money's been spent. So there's hundreds of athletes we weren't aware of in boxing all around the world in some pretty big countries like Chile, Brazil, that have qualified for the games, but they're not going to actually be able to go to the games because they don't have any money and they've run out and they can't train anymore. So the Pho3nix Foundation, as part of our Olympic program, is going to fund up to €1 million worth of funding for those athletes. So you've probably seen it on our social media channels of a lot of boxers. We have badminton players that have applied for the Pho3nix athlete grants, and we're handing out money at the moment to help those athletes get to the Olympic Games. So for fulfillment on my end, it's something I've always I'm so happy we're going in this direction. I'm so happy someone like Sebastian is so passionate about it, and I've been able to stand alongside him and spearhead the entire program for him, because it's been awfully fulfilling and just really, really touching and cool to change people's lives and just see the passion of an athlete, regardless of where they're from and their Olympic aspirations. And, a young guy, we've got Taji from Madagascar. He learned to swim in a rock pond at the beach. It was 4.5 meters by, and you couldn't flip on, you had to touch because it's coral and everything. And that was the pool he was going to train in to make the Olympics, to go to the Olympic Games. He came to Tanyapura. And, he's the first athlete to ever make an Olympic Games. And he's become a hero of his island nation. And if he didn't go to the Olympics, the disappointment for that nation, even though, and they've got no money. They're an island nation that's run for tourism. It's shut off this year. So they're broke, and so, speaking to him and for him to break down, and then his mother and father to be sitting there going, oh my gosh, why would you do this? I'm like, it's what foundations do. It's so cool. It's the coolest thing I've ever been involved in, that's for sure, from that perspective. And it's only going to get bigger and better. So I'm sending you a Pho3nix hat. So whenever you see Pho3nix, think youth in sport, and you're helping youth in sport. So it's really, really cool.
Well, do you know what, man? This sounds like a whole other interview. We need to do it another time. And there's more stuff on the Pho3nix, isn't there, than there's going to be on all the other triathlon stuff put together. But I think that sounds like a pretty cool place to leave it, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. We'll look out for the Pho3nix. Where can people find out about the Pho3nix Foundation if they want to read more?
All the digital channels, Pho3nix Foundation on Instagram, Pho3nix Foundation everywhere else, Facebook. You've got Vincent Louis would have seen that big Phoenix that Vincent put on his head. Alistair Brownlee's a Phoenix. There's some really cool stuff, but check out the website, pho3nixfoundation.com, and you'll love it. Follow us on social. It's all there.
All right, cracking stuff there from Chris McCormack. It's always such a thrill for me to talk to Chris. I've said this before on the show loads of times. he was my all-time inspiration to get involved in triathlon in the first place. And when I did my first Ironman back in 2003 down at Ironman Australia, Chris was the winner that day. And I can still remember, I had a poster for years of him on the wall taken on that day, of him running back towards me through the streets of Forster. And he just looked just amazing. He was in such incredible shape. And so to get the chance to chat with him and talk triathlon for me is just massive. I'm a massive fan of his, and I always will be. So to get the chance to have him on the show is amazing. Now, as I said earlier on in the show, a lot has changed since we recorded that interview. I think we only recorded about 10 or 12 days ago, actually, maybe not even that. It was probably even just a week ago, actually. But since then, anyway, there have been tons of withdrawals from this race out in Daytona. So we have no Georgia Taylor Brown, no Flora Duffy, no Jess Learmonth, no Lucy Charles Barkley on the women's side. On the men's side, obviously we've got no Jan Frodeno, we've got no Joe Skipper, no Cam Worth, no Christian Blumenfeld. So lots of the names that we talked about that we felt were going to shape the race. So I thought I'd give you a little update. Here's I'll be drawn. Who do I think is going to go? I think on the men's side, it's all going to come down to Ali Brownlee. I think he's still my favourite. I think he's raced himself back into great shape and great form this year. I think it's going to be him. It's going to be Lionel Sanders, who we know is really, really hungry for this. Is Sanders going to be able to bridge up on the bike? And if so, what effect is that going to have on his run? Honestly, I don't see Sanders having it on the run against the quality of a guy like Ali Brownlee. I think Vincent Lewis of France, he's going to be up there as well. How he's going to fare after 80 Ks on the bike in the TT position, that remains to be seen. But obviously, he's got an amazing race. He's coming off an incredible run of form in the WGS series. So who's going to bet against him? Sebi Kienle, again, I don't know what kind of shape he's going to be in, but he's going to be there off the bike alongside Lionel Sanders. And Gustav Iden, I think, we know he's in great shape over the short distances. He's obviously got the pedigree over the 70.3 distance, and he's coming in a little bit under the radar. So again, another one to watch. And who can count out Johnny Brownlee? We don't know what kind of form he's coming into it with, but again, we know that he's going to be there or thereabouts. He's going to be getting off the bike with Ali, and it's going to be a run race with whoever else is around there. And he always races well, as Chris said in the interview, he always races well when Ali's racing well. So, those are the guys, and we can't discount Javier Gomez. So again, form is the questionable thing, but he's going to be in and around the shape to do something as well. So I think it's between those guys on the men's side. Over on the women's side, my gut is still saying it's Holly Lawrence to take the win. I know she's been doing some great training out in California. If she comes in with good form, I think it's hard to see past her for the win here. Obviously, we've got Anne Haug, Nicola Spirig, Lisa Norden. Paula Finley of Canada is meant to be in really good form from what I've read on Slow Twitch. I think it's going to come down to Holly Lawrence racing against... Will Anne Haug get back into it on the bike? Maybe. If she is, it's hard to argue against her run, but it's going to be a great battle amongst those ones. So, yeah, watch this space. It's all going to be available online. It's available to watch through the PTO website. There's tons of stuff on there about how to watch it. If you make a donation there, you get an entry into their prize draw, and they've got tons of great prizes available there as well at the moment. So get over there and check that out. Okay, other stuff that I wanted to talk to you about. I had an amazing email come through from a guy called Neil Davidson. Neil has had an operation to remove his fibula. He had to have his fib used to rebuild his jaw after a tumor was discovered in his jaw. Long story short, he started listening to the show. He's got into triathlon. And as a lockdown challenge to himself, he decided to try and run 2 kilometers every hour for 24 consecutive hours. So 48K over 24 hours, but with a break in between all of them, which I think makes it even more difficult. He got really close. I think he got to within 2 hours of the finish. He called it off after 21 consecutive hours and 43K run in total. But yeah, he sent an email and he said he heard about Precision Hydration on the show and decided to give them a go. And they sent him a little little goodie bag as a well done, and gave him the Triumph of the Month award for doing it. So Neil, congratulations, man. I know it's a massive achievement to do something like this. To give yourself a challenge where you go all through the night and don't get any sleep, I think is exceptionally hard. And the fact that you've made a comeback, you've had this, what for anyone be a horrendous operation, and you've had your jaw rebuilt, mate, my hat goes off to you. It's absolutely brilliant performance. Well done. Okay, over into Coach's Couch this week. And I thought I'd spend just a little bit of time talking through some stuff that's come up in our Facebook group, because I think there's issues here that are going to affect all manner of listeners, and hopefully you'll take some inspiration from it as well. First up, we had a message from Will, who says he's had a real up and down week. Lots of stress at work, plus getting dark at 3 o'clock is really hard, and lack of sunshine. HRV's been up and down, been really influenced by the stress more than the training stress. So he said after having a really good session on the Tuesday Power Hour, he felt like he was really going to have a hard week and that he didn't need the recovery week that I got planned in for him. But as the week wore on, it was apparent that it was exactly what I did need. If I was still self-coaching, he wrote, I know I would have kept on going and smashed it this week without the recovery block. So it's good to get the recovery in and look forward to being able to hit the next 4 weeks really hard. And I thought that would be a really good thing to bring up with you guys. If you're out there and you're self-coached at the moment, we've gone through the first 4 weeks of our winter block, and we build in like a little mini recovery section at the end of that 4th week. So we still do an FTP set on the Tuesday, but no hard work for the rest of the week. And it's like a mini recovery thing over 4 or 5 days there from the Tuesday through to the Sunday. So give yourself that little break every 4 weeks, even if you're still, intent on building the FTP and having a great winter build. Firstly, listen to your body. Secondly, listen to your HRV readings. And when they say don't train hard, certainly don't train hard. But give yourself that little recovery break built in all the way through your blocks, because that regular rhythm of having some recovery is super, super important. And even more so when you're being self-coached. Okay? Next up, a shout out to our member Dave Clements. He said, I did a solo 10K PB today of 42.09. It's the fastest for a few years before I even started with triathlon, and it was on the back of a very nasty hangover. So, yeah, well done. Really impressive, Dave. It's a really solid start to your training. I'm really impressed with that. Hats off to you. We were back and forth a few times, and he then said, I'm now even more convinced about the 9-1 run-walk thing. I've now got evidence even more on the pace run training benefits. I feel like I've progressed without too much effort. So, Dave, I'm really happy to read that, mate. That consistency is paying off. Cracking work. I love it. And last up, a little message from Simon Maguire. He says, a good week. All my key sessions have been done. I just missed a small 30-minute run. My cycling is really coming on. I felt really strong on the 5x6 FTP set. Today on my long ride was by far the best I've ever felt on a cycle. I felt strong, fast, and was able to keep in position consistently for the full ride. I was enjoying it so much that I went over by 70 minutes. Wife was less than impressed. Body composition is really changing in this block. My upper body frame's really reduced quite a bit, and my leg muscles are getting really strong. I love the training. It's keeping me sane. So in and amongst all of this chaos, bring on another week. So Simon, congratulations. Guys, if you haven't listened to Simon's interview on Age Group Stories, go back into the archives and listen to that. Simon's lost a ton of weight and is even more motivated going into this year than next year than he was this year, which is just fantastic to read. So yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of inspiration, really, that I know it can be hard this time of year with the dark night setting in, but do what you can. If you're working from home, schedule yourself a little break in the middle of the day. Make your lunch first thing in the morning so it's ready to eat, and then use your lunch hour to go out for a run or a ride in the sunshine. And it can really make a difference at this time of year. So listen, if you like what you've heard here and you're not coached with us already, we think we've got the most comprehensive triathlon coaching program for busy age groupers, as well as triathlon training programs for every distance. So we've partnered with the Performance Chef so our athletes get ready-made meal plans, Matt Botterill for bike fitting, position and aerodynamics advice, Precision Hydration offering personalized hydration calls for our athletes, HRV for training for HRV guidance, so heart rate variability, determining whether you do a hard session or not on a given day. And we're also got some more partnerships to announce in the coming weeks. So yeah, keep your eyes on this for more details. I'm really excited about the partnerships we've got coming up. So if you like what you've heard and you want to talk through whether you'd be a good fit for coaching with me and the team, you can set up a call. There's a link in the show notes. You can have a 30-minute consultation call over video with me or the team, and we'll work out where you are, what you need to do to get where you are, where you want to go, essentially, and work out if training with Team Oxygen Addict is right for you. And you can give us a crack on the Zwift Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast Power Hour ride. That's Zwift Tuesdays, 7:15 p.m. UK time. Workouts guaranteed to raise your FTP and give you a faster, more powerful bike leg this coming season. So these are the workouts that our team are doing week in and week out. Come and train with us for free if you're on Zwift. All right then. So just to wrap this up, here are some discount codes and deals for you. PrecisionHydration.com. Use the code Oxygenaddict15 for 15% off your first electrolyte order. GroupEvolution.com. Oxygenaddict15 for 15% off your luxury triathlon training retreats with Dave Scott, no less. And TeamOxygenaddict.com. You can book a call with me and the team through the link in the show notes. So remember, there's links in the show notes for all of these sponsors, so you don't have to remember them. And until next week, remember to watch Challenge Daytona on Tinternet near you this weekend. Have a great, safe training and racing week. Be kind to yourself. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict Triathlon Podcast. See ya.